Joining me now, the Energy and Environment Minister, Josh Frydenberg. Minister, thanks for your time. Is the clean energy target dead as an idea?
No, it's not. And to quote or to paraphrase Mark Twain, reports of its death are greatly exaggerated. Let's remember, this was not a report by government. This was a report by Dr Finkel to government, to the federal government and to the state governments and to the territories. It only came back to us last Friday. It's now deserving of full and proper consideration. Yesterday's discussion in the party room was updating my colleagues about what's happening in the energy market and running through the key recommendations from Finkel.
But if they're worried about coal, figure 3.8 of the Finkel report suggests by 2050, coal, the usage of coal as an energy source would be greater than business as usual under a clean energy target. Are they not getting that bit of it?
Well, Dr Finkel has been very careful to point out that he's not putting any prohibitions on new development, including new coal.
He's not only saying that, he's saying there's going to be more
Correct.
coal use under a clean energy target than business as usual.
Well, what he's saying...
Your colleagues don't get that.
Well, what he's saying is that we need to keep coal in the system in order to get affordable power and as it does provide baseload power. Now, there are rapid transformations that are occurring in the energy system. We're seeing more wind, more solar come in and a great fall in the price of batteries and other forms of storage. But we need to ensure that that transition is smooth. What came through loud and clear from my colleagues last night is their deep concern, appropriately, about rising electricity prices. There was an extensive discussion about what we can do in terms of the gas market, and the Prime Minister's already announced that he's intervening to restrict gas exports. That's absolutely critical. We need...
Some of your colleagues want him to go further on that. Is there room to go further, a more interventionist approach on gas?
Well, Matt Canavan is working through the details of the export controls, and we have said that, you know, by July 1 we want to put this in place.
Your colleagues want the PM to do something now,
well, the PM is
to aggressively intervene here.
The PM is doing.
Is there room to do more?
Well, there will be work done in this area which will put downward pressure on prices. The PM...
Do you have price controls?
Well, that is a different step altogether, and there are ramifications of doing that. We've seen that in the UK, for example. But in relation to...
Just quickly, before we move on, what are the ramifications? Because that's what some of your colleagues want. They want price controls.
Because it's such an anti-competitive measure, what you do see is you see falls in investment and other appropriate activities by the businesses who can't get necessarily the proper returns on capital that they would expect.
Why is gas such a small fraction of the energy supply under a clean energy target by 2050? We keep hearing that we're one of the biggest
it's simply
gas suppliers and exporters. Why by 2050 is it such a small part of our supply?
It's simply a function of price. Because gas prices have tripled in the last 5 years.
So it can't be fixed by 2050?
Well, the point is, what we're trying to do is put downward pressure by restricting gas exports, but also the states, Kieran, have a huge role to play here. In Victoria, Daniel Andrews, the manufacturing capital of the country, is sitting on 40 years' worth of gas reserves, and he's locked up not just unconventional gas, i.e. fracking, but also conventional onshore.
But this is
gas.
About the coalition response, and Tony Abbott last night. Tony Abbott said last night in his contribution, it's not about. It shouldn't be just about emissions. It's got to be first and foremost about affordability. That his government only signed up to the Paris Agreement because it was not binding. I just want to show our viewers a couple of quotes from Mr Abbott in 2015. He said, this is what he said as Prime Minister: there is a definite commitment to 26%, but we believe under the policies we've got, with the circumstances we think will apply, we'll get to 28%. We will reduce our emissions by 26 to 28%. This is a very strong and responsible target. It is environmentally responsible. It is economically responsible. Which is right? Is it binding, or is it, as Mr Abbott says, this is a strong, responsible target, a definite commitment? Well, which is right? Abbott in 15 or Abbott in 17?
It is a strong, responsible target, and we are committed to it. So Tony Abbott, like Malcolm Turnbull today, have made public comments about our Paris commitments and how we take them very seriously. We do need to solve for the trilemma, which is energy affordability, energy security and lower emissions. I have to tell you, our priority right now is to put downward pressure on prices. Households in South Australia have just been whacked an extra $300.
Yeah, but sure, does that discrepancy between Prime Minister Abbott 2015 and 2017, does that frustrate you?
No, I'll leave.
He led the charge last night against this Finkel idea before you've even got a policy.
Look, I'll leave that to the commentators. The point is that my colleagues yesterday had a really good opportunity to express their concerns, to raise new ideas about what is happening in the energy system. And in terms of the Finkel review, we didn't take to the party room any specific recommendations.
But is the credibility in an argument there, if someone says that 2 years ago and then now is saying that we should not have this as a binding issue, is there credibility in that?
Kieran, you can ask me 23 different ways, but I'm not going to comment on what Tony Abbott had to say in the past and what he had to say in the party room yesterday.
Pretty pivotal individual in the debate. It goes to the credibility of the counter-argument.
And look, he is entitled to his view, and I've even had a private phone conversation with him which was very constructive and friendly. But there was an overwhelming feeling in the party room yesterday that business as usual is not an option. So we've actually made progress in that regard, that people recognise we do need to change course. And the fact is, we got strong support last night for a number of Finkel's recommendations around getting 3 years' notice of closure and more battery storage.
In relation to where to from here, how can you satisfy, placate elements of the party who want more of coal and want a greater incentive for coal and still have a clean energy target? They're not compatible.
Well, I wouldn't say that.
So you can do a clean energy target and potentially provide more support for coal? That would work?
Well, as you know, we've just been talking about how Dr Finkel allows for coal to provide more than 50% of the energy mix going forward under a clean energy target.
So you think you can get this through?
Well, this is simply the first stage of the debate. Dr Finkel has provided his recommendations to the COAG. The Cabinet hasn't fully considered Dr Finkel's report. There's been no specific recommendations that have been taken to the party room. Yesterday was a very helpful, constructive discussion, and I do note that all my colleagues believe business as usual is not an option.
All of them?
And yeah, I do. People aren't happy with the higher prices and the less stability we're seeing in states like South Australia.
One of your colleagues sent me the list of speakers. In fact, it was sent to other journalists in the press gallery, including, I believe, Philip Khoury, James Massola as well. This is the list on the screen for our viewers of those who spoke against is the first page. And you can see that's more than 20 names on that list, and only a handful for and a handful against. You could see Tony Abbott, the first name on that list, but some others that might surprise people. Russell Broadbent and Tim Wilson on there. And those who were for, including Luke Hartziker and Unclear, Craig Laundy and Karen Andrews among the list there. Is that an accurate list?
They must have been at a different party room meeting, whoever sent you that list, because that's not an accurate portrayal of what happened.
Can you give us a more accurate portrayal?
No, because I'm not one who's sending around lists. The point is that there were lots of different views expressed.
You can clear it up, though. Was it overwhelmingly for or against? Where was that?
Look, there was a number of views that were expressed, but more specifically, it was about how do we get lower prices down. People understandably need to look through the modelling of Finkel, which was only released yesterday afternoon. The report was only came down last Friday.
Do you think there was more support than that would suggest there?
I think the point is business as usual, Kieran, is not an option, and people liked a number of recommendations off the bat of Finkel, particularly around the storage and the notice of closure. The clean energy target is a more complicated question, and what they want to know is, will it lead to lower prices?
Minister, thanks for your time.